part 3 of our training on communication. So far, we have explored some basic elements that are necessary when trying to communicate effectively. It's important to know our audience, essentially who we are talking to, and remember who we are to them. Keep in mind what they are going through, recent changes, health-related considerations, and anything else that may give us insight into the situation, as well as help us figure out their needs. We also need to be aware of our own observations, like what we see in them, how they are responding, how they are talking, if they look tense, or anything else that we can capture with our senses. It's equally important to do that for ourselves. If we are caught off guard and have had our own buttons pushed, it's going to be necessary to figure that out and deal with it effectively in order to move forward and deal with the present situation as best as possible. After that, being aware of our ability to model healthy communication, build a trusting and safe environment for others to approach us, and to use awareness of our own state of being to influence others and hopefully help them feel just a little better than they already do. Using skills related to the de-escalation of anger and tension comes into play here. For example, just the way you stand and look at someone can either help them feel at ease or can contribute to heightened levels of stress. We then looked at 3 of the 6 recommendations for communication in part 2, focusing on remembering to listen and listen more. Sometimes people just need to be heard. Sometimes that alone can resolve a situation. Also, it requires that we don't engage in our own agenda and give them the opportunity they need. After that, we consider the importance of using validating people and using minimal encouragers. Both of them show the person that you're listening that what they have to say is important, and you help convey that through your body language, the words you use, and often just going with them and learning about what's going on. These can be anything from a slight nod, saying, "Yes, I understand," or just saying what you heard back to them. In part 3, we'll go over the importance of how you can say what you say, using assertive speech, and using layers in sharing something that may alone be received negatively, but with some effort can become an easier ask. These all require practice, and we all have our own strengths and areas to continue growing, but trying to make use of these 6 items together can make a difference. Well, let's get started. How you say what you say. This one's a biggie. What are the aspects about speech that you think are important? Well, you have to consider the content, the specific words you are using. You are a liar. Or whatever. What about those did you notice? The whatever can be very dismissive, sarcastic. Sarcasm works well when and if you and the person both have a common understanding of each other's use of sarcasm, and you both know what is being conveyed between the lines. Use of sarcasm with just anybody can backfire. Also, accusing somebody of lying, that can backfire as well. You also have to pay attention to the tone of your voice. Hello. 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 Also, how loud are you speaking? When I think of this one, I think of my parents and I and how we speak when we get together. My family is from the state of Sonora in Mexico. In Sonora, people are often loud, kind of brusque. My family members may even be exceptionally loud sometimes. I once took my mom to a doctor's visit, and as we sat in the waiting room, I noticed how loud we both were talking and how quiet everyone else was. Some of this can be cultural. Some of it can also just be part of their personal characteristics. And some of it may just be due to feeling anger. Pay attention to how fast or slow you're talking. If you're talking fast, your brain may be working fast. Your body may also be trying to catch up, getting your heart working fast, pumping blood. Now imagine doing the opposite, talking really slow. How do you feel about this? What do you think happens if you start talking like this instead of how you do normally? Be considerate of how you use silence or pauses during your communication. Used well, you can really capture people's attention and help direct the flow of interaction. As you listen to others and affirm them, sometimes it is useful to steer the conversation in a particular direction. Sometimes people get into thought spirals, and it may involve subjects that you're familiar with, and you know where the person's going with the content they're sharing, and it may not be somewhere particularly good or productive. In these instances, you can find an opportunity to step in, maybe start by using their name and going from there. It often helps if you ask a question, asking permission for you to do something, such as the following example. Peter, I have a thought about that. Is it okay if I share it with you? It's possible that they respond positively and allow you to step in. They may be interested in what you have to say, insight you may have, something. You may also choose to affirm or validate the person at this point too, further reinforcing that you're listening, that you're true with them, and that you're wanting to help. Pay attention to how you say things. If you're stressed, upset, worried, bored, it may show. You are not a robot, but try to practice awareness of this. It is important to look back at the foundation of good communication and be aware of how you are responding to the process. If you do find yourself upset, it may be good to realize why and make sure to take your time and provide communication that is as free of that anger as possible. Whatever amount is in the message may muddy the waters. If someone does notice that you're upset, it may be productive to admit it, maybe a little or maybe a lot. For example, someone can say, "Yes, honestly, I am a little upset. I know that we have talked about this issue before, and I thought that we had figured things out." Being honest about it can buy a lot of credibility with the other person. Again, how you share this is important. If you don't feel comfortable admitting to actually being upset, you can respond like this. "Well, I'm honestly thinking about the conversation we had about this, and I thought we had figured things out. I'd really like to talk about it again and see if we can figure out the solution." You don't necessarily have to spell out the fact that you're angry, but you also can admit to the source of the anger, the issue that you believed had been resolved. Another item that can affect how we say what we say is how we're doing personally, how we take care of ourselves. Are we sleeping enough? Are we eating well? Are we finding time to do things that are important to us? Spending time with people who are important to us, as well as other things that we find of value. And if we're taxed in all ways and not nourishing some aspects of our being, mind, body, and soul, it will show up in our communication. This is when we say that it might come up and in a way that we had not wished. We might find ourselves being irritable, anxious, kind of down, or feeling easily activated by somebody pushing our buttons. Again, remember that this is your opportunity to use time to your advantage. Take 1 second and breathe. Take 1 second and feel your feet flat against the floor. Connect with parts of yourself that are okay. Parts that don't feel stressed, tired. Connect with your values and why you're here to begin with. All of that can take a fraction of a second. So practice taking the second and making something good out of it. Assertive speech. Earlier I mentioned the idea of boundaries, and that definitely goes with the idea of assertive speech. In providing assertive speech, we want to recognize our end of things, essentially affirming ourselves and our stance, affirming our role, affirming our observations, affirming our limitations, what we can do, what we can't do, and what we want to do. Assertive speech involves using I statements, such as, when you don't clean your plate after dinner, I get upset because I know that I will have to clean it for you. When that happens, I'm tired and often overwhelmed after having a long day at work. Compare that statement to this other example. You're so lazy. I hate you. Why can't you get your lazy butt off the couch and just do something for once? Wash your plate. Are you stupid? What's different about the two? I know, that was quite a contrast, pretty extreme. The first example shared that the person is upset, shared their observation in I statement form. They did not insult the other person, name call, criticize, but they focused on their observation, their experience, and sharing how the action of the other person affects them. Sometimes people communicate with one another and they beat around the bush, or say things in such a way where people have to read between the lines. My son, for example, is turning 5 and often does this. He approaches me and he'll say something like, "You know, Dad, remember that day you gave me Oreos? Those were good, huh? I think I had 5 of them." He'll then let that statement hang there. He won't say it, but he obviously wants Oreos. I then ask, "So do you want Oreos?" He'll then say, "Yes." It makes me laugh, but I do honestly like it when he's able to be more direct. Anyhow, how direct and clear are you with the consumers you work with? How direct and clear are you with the colleagues you work with? What do you think are some of the drawbacks or consequences of not being assertive? For one, I think ambiguity is a source of problems. If we leave things kind of hazy, then a lot can be left up to interpretation. Are you coming on Saturday? Yes, likely. Does that mean yes? Does that mean no? What do you experience when hearing that answer? Yes, likely. Let's pretend that you're the person who said yes, likely. Let's assume that you truly believe you are intending to go on Saturday. What may be a more direct or assertive statement? How about, "I believe I will. I frankly want to go. However, I know that I may have to take my mother to the airport in the morning. I haven't gotten confirmation from her yet, so I'm waiting for that in order to know for sure. Is it okay if I confirm for sure a little bit later, as soon as I hear from her?" How do you think that conversation can go from here? What do you think the difference is between yes, likely, and the explanation afterwards of having to take the mother to the airport? Assertive speech does require practice and confidence sometimes. If that is something you don't feel very confident doing, try practicing assertive speech in situations that are pretty easy to deal with. Remember to focus on yourself, sharing your observations, your thoughts, needs, wants, and desires. Focus on sharing how the other person's actions affect you. It can be positive or negatively. When you blank, I feel blank. That's kind of like an example of the structure. Always remember your ultimate objective as well. Setting limits, conveying boundaries, recognize and affirm for yourself the obligations that you have. Do you have $1 million to give me? Be clear with what you cannot do. Be clear with your limitations. And then focus on what you can do. Focus on strengths, opportunities, and on ways to work together in solving a problem. Bring awareness to the other person's strengths. Help convey your awareness of those strengths. And help them share what those goals or objectives are. I mentioned earlier that all communication or interaction is a negotiation. Try standing in line somewhere and get as close as you can to the person in front or behind you. How close can you get to occupying the same space they're currently occupying? With most people, we feel a natural personal boundary where we feel comfortable being close to others within a certain distance. Then when that space is invaded, it will result in either one person's adjustment or it may result in some conflict. People setting limits. Layers. Lastly, using layers when communicating with others. Here, what you can try is to create a sandwich or a cake, whichever you prefer to think of. The top layer will be something validating, something true. For example, John, I really appreciate it when you wash your dishes after using them. It is very helpful, and you are really good at putting things away right away afterwards. The middle layer is going to consist of the ask. This is what you're hoping to get, or the outcome. So, John, I'd like to ask you to try to wash the dishes you use each time, like we had talked about before, where I'll take out the trash every night and you agreed to wash the dishes. I know that there are times that you forget or you get busy. That happens to me too. But there are times like tonight where you ate and left the dishes without being washed. And I'm happy to help from time to time, but it does take a lot out of me as I come home exhausted. Like I said before, it means so much to me to have your help because it does make a big difference. So I'd like to ask that you remember to wash the dishes, and I hope that you can start doing them again tonight. The idea is that you're going to layer some validation, awareness of the person's strengths, followed by observation, how the situation affects you, and then wrapping up by combining a bit of both at the end. This takes some practice, and it can be helpful. One important aspect is to try and not label the person or the behavior, but to stick with observations and reflection of what the consequences or the behaviors are to you. Layering is a strengths-based approach to helping the person acknowledge how they are valuable, have influence, and can be important in the lives of others. People usually like to be recognized for positive things, and most people will try to perform in receipt of positive validation. Well, as we wrap up part 3 of the communication training, in which we've been trying to implement awareness of others, of ourselves, of the way we speak, of the way we approach situations, trying to make use of each other's strengths, being aware of our weaknesses as well, and trying to see how we can best come together and communicate effectively and try to produce positive outcomes. I think largely we've been talking about how we all like to be spoken to. We like to be listened to. We like to be affirmed. We like to be encouraged to speak. We like it when people are conscientious or thoughtful of how they speak to us. And I think we appreciate it as well when people not just focus on what they can't do, but also try to figure out a way in which they can be helpful. And employing all of those things within the layers of communication or the process of communication from start to finish. So I encourage you to practice some of these techniques. A lot of them you probably already use. You might already be using all of them, perhaps. So if anything, it's a good reminder of some of those skills that you've already learned. A good reminder to be on top of your game when the situation arises and you find yourself perhaps feeling a little vulnerable to stress, to being tired, to just having a long day, right? And taking a moment, focusing on taking a breath, on being aware of your body, being aware of the present moment, what your role is, and what kind of outcome you would like to achieve. And taking a moment and doing the best you can with that. For some others, you may have actually learned some new stuff and try to practice it, right? Kind of like the idea of using time or silence to your advantage. And having a longer pause than normal, or maybe saying things a little slower than you normally do. Maybe you find that captures the attention of the person that you're talking to. Maybe you find that doesn't work. Everyone's different. But try to use some of these techniques and see how with your colleagues and staff members, how with the consumers, they tend to work out. And go from there. Well, I appreciate your listening to the video, and I hope you found it helpful, and if at all possible, maybe even entertaining in some way. I wish you all well, and again, I always try to acknowledge the little things that you do throughout your day that make a difference in the lives of your colleagues and the consumers you work with. So I invite you to take a moment and be aware of that yourselves. Well, thank you very much. Take care. I wish you well. Until next time.